Welcome to this latest edition of the Real Deal podcast. I'm your host, Cyril Gerald Quinn, recording this on a Thursday as we look back. Of course, it's episode 881 of the Real Deal podcast. And we look back at the series finale of the hit show FX's Snowfall, season 6, episode 10, The Struggle. Um, Themes, we'll get right into it. All Alone. And in essence, that was what Franklin Saint was at the end of this episode, all alone. He had nothing, no house, no money. Well, with the exception probably of one friend in terms of Leon. But basically, in Franklin's world, we'll talk about that Leon scene later. He was all alone. He was by himself. And that was a theme, I think, in essence, for not just Franklin Saint. He's the easy one to look at. But a lot of characters in this episode were alone with their decisions and with their choices. Sissy's in jail by herself. You have Louie still on the run by herself. Uh, even Leon, though, he still has Wanda. He had, there was a point where Wanda says, you know what, I'm out. I'm out. So, Leon, in essence, with Franklin doing his own thing, with Wanda going back to Ghana, there were parts of his episode where he was by himself. So you had a number of characters in this episode who were alone with the choices and decisions that they have made not only throughout the course of this episode, but the course of these six past seasons. But there was no one who was more alone than one Franklin Saint. Let's get right into it, the deep dive. ALTON 2.0. So last week on the podcast, I kind of saw this coming a bit in terms of I didn't, you know, last week I was kind of convinced after watching the episode that they probably were not going to kill him. Especially once he loses the $73 million and he has no chance of achieving the $37 million from Teddy. Once that falls through, I thought that this was a possibility that he would end up with absolutely nothing. And to the credit of the writers, to the credit, and if he was still alive, or John Singleton, I'm sure he would have agreed and signed off on Franklin going out the way he went out. This was the best possible scenario for the character to go out. He died, not dies. He's stuck in a house that does not even remotely resemble the house that he grew up in with his mom, or the house that he shared great moments with, when Alden came back, when they were somewhat a family in, say, towards the last part of season 3 into season 4, Leon coming over, Wanda, uh, you know, some of the family breakfasts that they had, especially I want to say like in season 4, with Jerome. That is completely done. He is by himself in that house. That house is a shithole. He is, of course, has no money. He has nothing. He has absolutely nothing. He looks like shit. And this is what all of his choices led up to. Um, it's interesting because it did not have to go. And again, this was the thing about Franklin Saint season 6, that it became just about Franklin Saint. Like, there was a time where he had great resources, where he had people around him, and he utilized those people. Well, for this last part of this season, especially the last 3 or 4 episodes, he it wasn't about utilizing using the people around him. It was about, you owe me, give me, because I'm desperate. Not about, hey, what do you have advice on this? What are your thoughts on this? No, 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 no. Sissy, this is my. I bought you this house, so I kind of need it right now. Leon, you got 3 million. Hey man, what the fuck? You're the reason why I'm the reason why you have this 3 million. He had other opportunity. He had opportunities to get out, to kind of start, not even start over. Think about this. So he goes. He has $800,000 in the bank. He also had a property, downtown property that was still prime real estate that he could have sold to Paul Davis. It's the smart move. And Veronique, at that point, Veronique, even but I mean, I think Veronique was done once he put his hands around her throat. But from a business standpoint, him selling that property to Paul Davis would have been the smart move. He could have got millions upon millions for that. Okay. That's the smart move. So he had chances to not so much even start over, but he had chances to kind of, lick his wounds and really get back into becoming a businessman, possibly. He was out the drug game. That was done. The CIA had gotten what they wanted. They were done. Teddy, even though Teddy being dead, 37 million, all that was done. He actually had a chance to get out and get out clean, but he could not see past his own. He couldn't see past himself. He just couldn't. He could not see past. He was stuck on the 73 million. He was stuck on the ideal that he built this by himself and didn't need anybody's help, which we know. I mean, it was the first thing from the truth. I mean, he had, Louis, Jerome, his mother from a business standpoint, Veronique from a business standpoint, Leon with the muscle. Like, this was a situation where he just did not recognize where the self awareness was completely gone, and you had a character that was totally just stripped down, mentally, physically. You had a character that just he was kind of like a player. He's kind of like a basketball player who they'll tell you they want to win, but they don't care. They really don't care about winning if they cannot win their own way. If they can't win their way, then it's like whatever. I'm just gonna put up numbers. I want to put up numbers. Well, yeah, instead of averaging 25, maybe we only need you to average 20 and maybe 3 or 4 more assists. Nah, I want to get my 25. I want my 25. Oh, but we're gonna lose. Whatever. No, we're not gonna lose. I'll get my 25. We can still win. That's what Franklin was. Like, he wanted to do it his way. It was his way or the highway, and that ended up being his complete undoing. Um, and it goes beyond pride. I know the episode ended, with Kendrick Lamar's Pride, which made perfect sense. But he was just a guy who, again, did not recognize really how good he had it in terms of the people that were around him and the people that he actually was delusional to think that he could go about this alone. And he ends up being the thing that he detested the most. If you go back, look at those episodes where Alton was, struggling, where Alton was before Alton cleaned himself up, or with the help of Sissy. Alton, of course, was an alcoholic, drug addict. Alton was out in the streets, homeless, had nothing. Franklin detested that, and that's who he became in essence. And I can make a case that him becoming Alton, the Alton, is even worse than the original, than Alton and what Alton dealt with. Alton was a Black Panther. Um, we know what society and what America, this country, did to the Black Panthers. So we can see, you can see, you can go read, so what happened to Huey P. Newton, Huey P. Newton, and what have you. Some of his struggles. So that kind of actually made sense. What happened to Alton, considering what the country did to the Black Panthers. You could see a lot of them getting into drugs and having nothing as the country turned their backs on him. Alton probably had no outs or nowhere to turn or nothing. And not to make an excuse for some of the things that he did, in terms of not being there for his family, but in terms of how society felt about the Black Panther organization. Franklin, there, I mean, he still had, again, there still was places for him to go he still had an out. He still had other options that he could have explored. It wasn't like if he didn't get to 30, if he did not get to $37 million, and that was the end of life. Like, no, no, no. There were other options that he could explore. Um, in terms of even with Leon, Leon with Veronique. So the character absolutely got what he deserved. I again, I will compare this to two other series finales. Series finales with protagonists. You look at The Shield back in the day with the character played by Michael Chiklis. I think his name was Vic, and how he ended up the series finale. They didn't kill him. He didn't get locked up, but he ended up basically at a desk job with no power, with a boring job, no gun, no power, had typing up paper, doing paperwork. And it was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant because that character, he ended up being something that he absolutely despised. He was no longer part of the action, no longer was relevant. And you look at Marlo Stansfield in The Wire, he ends up, yes, Marlo does have $10 million when he sold to Connect, but Marlo's thing was never about money. Marlo was about power, control, street reputation, his name ringing out. By the end of the series, no one knew who Marlo was on the streets anymore. They were talking about Omar. Even though Omar, was dead. Marlo wanted them to be talking about him. Said, remember, you know who I am? Nah, nigga, you know who I am. And that's how Marlo went out. Powerless. So again, it's a brilliant, and those are two of and The Wire and The Shield are considered two of the greatest series finales in the history of television. They are. They're I'm sure they rank in the top 10. I think The Wire series finale is the best series finale that I've ever seen. Like they perfectly wrapped everything up. Despite the fact that they didn't have a lot of time, a lot of episodes to wrap it up. Remember that series, that The Wire only had 8 episodes. Um, did they have 10? I think the last season of Wire only had uh they had 10 episodes. And I would say they had 10. They only had 10 episodes, but still they normally got 12 to 13 episodes over the course of their series. So again, the Franklin character, I'm glad to kill him would have been too easy. Death would have been far too easy for somebody had done that, done so much damage to the community, for the lives, everything that he had done. The character was just at that point. It was no rooting for him, to be honest with you. I didn't even at his current state where he ended up with. I didn't feel sorry for him at all. Maybe a little bit if he would have let the locksmith live, but and again, great choice by the writers. He kills his locksmith with 3 kids. At that point, it's like there was no redemption for him. There was no way to feel any type of empathy for that character. He was going past that. He was way past that. He clearly couldn't see the forest from the trees in terms of what his mom did to save everybody, saved him, saved Leon, saved all of them, and sacrificed her life in terms of she's going to be in prison for the rest of her life for killing Teddy Mack. So he couldn't see that. So ultimately, the character got what the character Franklin Saint got what he deserved, and he again, wherever long he lives, will have to live the rest of his life with those choices. Veronique moves away, has a bit. He has a son. Veronique moves far away from him. Um, you see him catch up with Peaches, and that equates to what, $12,000. Something that would, at that point, was meaningless to him. That had nothing, that he could do nothing with, that didn't help him at all. Out of the 5 million that Peaches had stole from him. So I thought that they did again. This was the way to end the series. With him going back to with him ended up becoming a worse version of his father, of what his father was at the beginning of this series. And again, remember, If you go back and look at those old episodes, season two in particular, two and three, he despised out. Despised. He absolutely despised out and what out represented and what out stood for. He hated it. Couldn't stand like he did like he was not and even when out was cleaned up, the Black Panther part of out he despised he didn't like he despised it. Because they were the album was not about capitalism. Album was not about the materialistic stuff, the money. Album was in essence for the people. In essence for the people. Now you look at what happened to Franklin Saint. Franklin Saint turned his back completely on his own people for pure money, greed, pride, turned his back on everybody and just saw them as just things, as people, even whether his mom, Leon, they were just things to him. They were no longer people to him until you got to that again that that moment at the end of the basically one of the last scenes of the episode where he had nothing and he kind of humanized they kind of humanized him with that moment that he had with Leon and what he truly felt about Leon. But that was at a point where he knows that there was nothing to be gained, that he had nothing, that his life was, at at a bottomless pit, that he was at rock beyond rock bottom. Best scene, Sissy and Franklin. Sissy stuck to her promise that she was completely done with Franklin. She did not utter one single word to him in the two scenes that they had when she was in prison. One scene, he tries to after she pleads guilty to the first degree murder, which never happens, despite going against the wishes of her lawyer apprentice and what have you. She pleads guilty. She goes on this tangent about, of course, what she's saying is true about the government, uh, pouring crack, funding a legal war, and what Teddy Mack was doing, and I see Teddy Mack, pouring crack into the communities, destroying the community. So she goes on that, basically gets contempt of the court, and then the second scene, he tries to go. He's at his desperate. He tries to get her to sell the house. This is after Veronique had basically took everything, wiped out his accounts of $800,000. So he goes to City, tries to sell, tries to get her to sign over the house, so he can have some more cash, to to try to do something. And she doesn't utter a word, and he goes ballistic, calls her all types of bitches and what have you, and has to be physically escorted out by corrections officers. So brilliantly played by Michael Hyatt, and when you listen, you love. I'm always it's always love great acting when there's no words being said. Her facial expression, her body language told the story of we're done here. Like I did my last paper for you by killing Teddy Mack, and there's nothing else to discuss. She doesn't even give him a inkling that she is going to support anything that he's about, um, that he's done, or the person that he's become any longer. And I think from Sissy's perspective, also, there's guilt. There's no question that there's guilt in terms of she has to be filled partially responsible for creating the monster that became Franklin Saint. So she's at that point. She's at a point where it's like, this is it. Like I'm not. You can come. You can keep coming here, but we're not. In terms of helping you with this, we have nothing else to talk about. Nothing. Sissy and Leon. This was the exact 180 in terms of her thoughts and feelings about Franklin. Leon, she tries to convince Leon, tells Leon basically to go with after they discuss Wanda going back to Ghana. He tells Leon to pack a suitcase of books and go with your wife, atone for what you've done, and come back when when you've atoned for what you've done, come back. He does that. Um, he they share some tender moments. They tell each other that they love each other. She always looked at Leon as a second son. Um, in a sense. Now, really, Leon is her only son at this point. And she wants nothing, has nothing want nothing. It has nothing to do with Franklin, and she basically calls Leon, her biggest surprise versus Franklin being her greatest failure or disappointment. So Franklin, the void that Franklin left, Leon somewhat has is going to fill uh in terms of a mother son relationship. Um, these two characters always had excellent chemistry between them because Leon grew up in a house of a bunch of kids, no father. Mother was only someone who kind of took money from him or used him for his drug money. So in terms of nurturing, Leon Sissy was the only nurturing figure in Leon's life when you think about it. Like Jerome, Louis, that was all business. Even Franklin as his best friend wasn't nurturing. That was business. That friendship developed into just business. And even Kevin, you know, Kevin early seasons was a friendship, but we know what happened to Kevin. So Leon didn't have a lot of people to go to. I mean, really, in essence, Leon, there was Wanda Franklin and Sissy. That was it. And with at this point, this is before Leon went back to Ghana to join Wanda. Franklin's doing his own thing. Sissy's in jail. In essence, Sissy was the last person that Leon had to kind of have any type of emotional connection with. So you saw how tight, how close they were. Um, and Sissy again was married to a Black Panther. She sees the potential that Leon has to help rebuild the community. I think that her wanting her to, I think that is her ultimate goal. I think is for Leon to kind of somewhat undo a lot of the damage, some of the damage that Franklin has done to the community. So it's kind of like trading one son for the other in essence. To be honest with you, you have one son who's going his way, who's lost. She says Franklin's lost, but you see the potential in another son-like figure who sees the world similar to to how she sees it, and has a chance to do some great things in the community with the shelter, with young people. You saw Leon discussing that with Franklin in the last scene. So very powerful scene from that standpoint. Uh, Isaiah John was tremendous in this episode. By the way, he was phenomenal. I haven't given him enough credit over the course of these six seasons. I always loved the character of Leon, just as the best friend, as the number two, as the guy who always had Franklin's back. But I haven't not given enough credit to the actor Isaiah John, and he was in this episode. He was even, like I said, acting without saying nothing. He had some scenes. There were some scenes he had where just the body language and facial expressions told the entire story, and that is the mark of great acting when you can get what a person is thinking and saying just by how they're looking and just how again their body language and what have you. Franklin Leon, this was very sad uh, because I'm glad that the episode ended with these two because these two have been in essence this relationship has, in essence, somewhat defined the entire series. Remember, it was Leon who helped, and that was the biggest reason why Franklin was able to get to the point to where he was at building an empire. It was Leon. Leon was the muscle. Leon was someone who, at one point, Franklin respected. Uh, And there was a point where they absolutely had each other's backs. I mean, Franklin in season 4 refused to turn over Leon to Manboy. When there were a lot of people said, like I heard a lot of fans of the show said, hey, he should have, probably should have, way Leon was acting up and the way Leon was carrying himself, they'd have been probably best off if he would have just gave Leon up to Manboy after Leon mistakenly shot Manboy's niece with Khadijah in the car in that scene in episode in season 4. But he did. So these two have always had a tight relationship. We get to a point. We got this particular scene. This is where Leon has come back from Africa. Franklin is living in a house that, of course, that doesn't belong to him. In essence, they are 6 to 8 months behind in state property taxes. Franklin is suffering from a disease that that he know he's not only has become an alcoholic, he's also suffering from a disease, and I forgot the name of it, where you don't want to be around people, that you just want to stay in the house. All no matter what how fucked up the house is, you're just gonna stay in the house with basically almost no light and what have you. So Franklin at this point is done mentally, physically, is completely done. But they catch up. Uh, Leon Leon tries to get him to help him with some community work. Franklin's not even paying attention to that. Franklin's telling them all these stories about, all these about yesteryear and Veronique, and Franklin still has this ideal that he matters in the grand scheme of the government looking at him, which they were not at this point. The government, the CIA, once Franklin handed over Rubin, that I forgot to mention earlier, when Franklin handed over Rubin to the CIA, he was no that was it. The CIA was he was of no use to them. He wasn't getting his money, so at that point he became just completely irrelevant, and it was just that was it. He was no longer on the radar. So at this point, we get to the end of the episode. No one is they. I mean, they just want Franklin out the house because he's not paying. He can no longer can't afford the house. Has no money. It has nothing to do with the government, what have you. But Franklin, in his mind, as he's talking to Leon, still had that being addicted to the game, but still had that mentality that he was relevant from that standpoint. And of course, Leon is listening to all this, taking all this in, is absolutely breaking Leon's heart to see Franklin in this uh with this mindset, and to see Franklin in his current predicament. Um Leon gives him $20. Franklin goes buys a bottle, gets some liquor. And then as they come back from the store, you see them take the house. Franklin at this point nothing, has nothing. He says, look, I did it my way. He shares a moment with Leon saying, you're my best friend. I'm proud of you. Tear falls from his eye. You see Leon crying, or tears coming from Leon. Then Franklin walks away as Leon yells his name twice. As Leon offered to pay, saying they can't take your house. I'll pay the state property, the state taxes. And Franklin just like, no, no, I'm good. That's it. Like that was it was the end of that. And Franklin walks away, and then you hear the Kendrick Lamar Pride take us into the credits. Yeah, I think with Franklin and Leon, despite the fact that we had gotten to the point where Franklin didn't respect any of the people who helped him get to where he was at, as far as being a drug empire kingpin. At this point, he's at rock bottom, and Leon is the only person who gives a shit about Franklin. And I think, when he says, I'm proud of you, you're my best friend, I think that's the first time that reality set in on Franklin, that this is the only guy that actually cares about whether or not I live or die, or this is the only person in the world that cares about my existence. And I think that hits Franklin in a real way. And I think Leon knows that as well, that he's the only person that cares anything about Franklin. So, perfect way to end the series with those two. Uh, beginning, of course, the beginning of the series was spearheaded by those two. I mean, we can make a case. The series was, around set around. I mean, Franklin, Teddy Mack, and Leon. I know Jerome, and had Jerome and Louis, but Leon was, he was Franklin's Chris Partlow, Franklin's, Stringer Bell. If you want to go to, if you want to go into the wire, he was his number two, and the backbone of his operation. Um, and I think Franklin, at the end, once all the money is going, once at that, he still has pride. Still has pride. He still was talking big, talking mad, talking a bunch of shit, not taking responsibility for anything. But even through all that, he recognizes the importance that Leon had on his life. And I think the thing I loved about this scene was the idea of the power of friendship. Like, despite everything that Leon, I mean, remember earlier in this episode, Franklin threatened Leon because Leon's like, I'm not giving you the $3 million. It's blood money, but I'm not giving it to you because that would defeat the purpose of what your mom did in terms of she sacrificing herself for all of us. And Franklin basically says, I'm gonna have to take it. Pulls a gun, but realizes that there are about 6 or 7 guns behind him that would kill him in a second if he were to raise up on Leon. So, they were not in a good place earlier in the episode, or maybe fast forward. That was like, say, 2 years earlier. But despite that, despite everything that transpired, Leon is there for Franklin, despite all of that, and was willing to be there for him. And that is the definition of a true friend. Someone who's there for you, even if you shit on them and mistreat them. So I liked that idea. I liked how that Leon was always loyal. He was always loyal to the, and sometimes loyal to a fault. And that they were consistent with that part of the character. And so you see Leon go his way, you see Franklin go his way, and the episode wraps up. MVP. This was a Damson Ildris toward the force performance. This is why I question Franklin's sake. This was his episode from start to finish. As he goes, as he reaches the beyond desperation, he starts drinking. I remember this character had never drunk or taken any drug willingly. Remember that the minus the Louis and Jerome's wedding when spite when I can't remember the character's name that put spiked the wedding, the punch or the food or the chocolate with PCP. Man, I can't remember the character's name. Everybody, we Scully, yeah, Scully. Minus that, Franklin had never done any type of substance. He wasn't even taking a sip of alcohol. He wasn't. We always saw him drinking water or cokes. So for the first time, he drinks, and we saw that him spiraling. And he remember this is in his blood because his father out was an alcoholic. But again, this was when I mean toward the fourth performance by Damson Ildris, this was and he won't get nominated, of course, but this was a Emmy caliber type performance from start to finish. He was spectacular in this. And again, easy to overact some of the scenes he did, whether it was with his mom, whether it was with Veronique. No, everything was measured. Everything was right. His timing for when he did lose control was right on point. How again, this was as good as it gets for an actor, um, especially to end the series. A guy who has been, who is the lead in the series, who has, in essence, and again, there are a lot of excellent characters that we like, but in essence, carried the series. He was spectacular in this. He was absolutely spectacular in this episode, and without question was the MVP. And I could again, Leon. Leon Isaiah John's character was tremendous as well. Leon was spectacular. Leon was if it was not for Damson Idris in this Franklin Saint, I certainly would have, Leon would have been, second runner up. But this was a Franklin Saint episode. This was he was without question the MVP of this episode. Thoughts and legacy. I guess I watched this episode twice, hour and a half episode. I guess the legacy of this. Guess my thoughts overall is it ended the way that it should have ended. I think you have to give him a lot of credit. I remember, so John Singleton, has been gone, has been dead for passed away 4 years ago. I think in the summer of 2019. So he passed away in between season 3 and 4, right before the pandemic, and there were question marks about what the show would look like moving forward. Would there be even a show um, without John Singleton? And to his credit, because he built the foundation, and to the credit of the writers and producers, the show didn't. Frankly, I don't think it missed a beat. Now you could make a case. I'm not gonna sit up here and argue. Well, at one point, I'll rank the seasons. I can't right now. It's too fresh in terms of ranking the seasons. I still think pound for pound, probably my favorite seasons. Probably I would have to go between season two and season 4, between those two seasons. But listen, the first 3 seasons were like lights out. The first 3 seasons were absolutely lights out. But again, you had John Singleton, but they did not miss much the last 3 seasons. To be honest with you, they really did. Um, so I think that that's part of the legacy of the show. They have to be given a tremendous amount of credit for you lose the creator of the show midway midway between after the season 3, and the show is still able to the show was still able to be highly successful and have a strong ending in terms of the series finale. And to me, I don't think that you cannot be. I don't see how you cannot be satisfied in terms of how in terms of how it ended and what transpired. Um, this what happens to drug kingpins dead in jail and again, this Franklin was a different type of drug kingpin. So I actually think this was even worse than him even being in jail, or I actually think this was even worse than him going to jail or even dying. Like to have to live in his own filth in a sense. So from that standpoint, I like they have to give some extra. You have to give them some extra points for the legacy of the show. Again, I'm not gonna put it up there. Listen, The Wire, Breaking Bad, Mad Men, um, to a much lesser extent, Game of Thrones, because that last season, we know what happened in that last season. There are about 4 or 5 shows, Sopranos, of course. There are about 4 or 5 shows that were a part of the golden age of television that I don't think will ever be touched. And they're on their own Mount Rushmore. But this show, I would say, to me, is in that second tier of shows that I think will have a lasting impact, especially on the culture. Like, look at the music that happened during the show. You look at a show again. To me, one of the definitions of a great show is like it was a history lesson in terms of the crack era, the Reagan era, capitalism, communism. They covered a lot of areas over the course of the last 6 seasons with this show. And in many ways, it could have forced you to do some research on some things that went on in this country. It gave you a sense of the real America, what America really is like, and what America really is versus the perception of what this country, of what a lot of people think this country is all about. So again, the legacy to me of the show, I think that it's on that second tier of all time great shows. Again, there's a there are a lot of shows. There are a few shows that just will be untouchable with the writing, the actors, and what have you. We know those shows are, but this show will have a long lasting impact on the culture for sure. I mean, without you, you will hear Franklin Saint's name in hip hop for the next, five, you know, for the next 5 years at least. But this is all there is to it in terms of the cultural impact of um of the show. But I'm not going to. We're not done with Snowfall. We're done with, of course, the recaps and what have you. We're not done with the recaps. So, a couple things. We will have a special guest on next week to talk about Snowfall. Someone who knows a lot about the show. So I'll tease it. I'll tease that. And there is a possibility that I do a rewatch for seasons 1 through 3 and put out podcasts for those seasons. And remember, I didn't start doing podcasts for this episode, for this show until season 4. So I've done the last 3 seasons. Why not do the first 3 seasons, especially now that I've seen the entire show? So that'll give me a unique perspective from that standpoint, having already seen all these episodes multiple times. So that could be on the horizon, but the special guest is definitely coming next week. With that podcast will be commencing very very soon. So I've enjoyed covering this show, doing these podcasts with you. I hope you've enjoyed this. This podcast will be out later on. This podcast will be out later on. Um, at worst, early Friday. Have a great rest of your day. I'll see you. So long.